Hi everyone, today it's not Amadici speaking to you, it's just an ordinary guy, Nick. As I mentioned before, this video is probably the hardest one for me to make because I want to be completely open with you. I'll explain why strange things have been happening with the channel lately, why some videos have been repetitive, why I don't use my real voice, and much more. I'll also share why I've decided to take a break from making theories about my favorite show, The Amazing Digital Circus. And to close this chapter, I'll show you my favorite video on this channel at the end. I'd like to start with the most important question for me, why the channel uses an AI voice. Honestly, I don't even know how to explain it, but I just can't bring myself to use my real voice. Something inside stops me from showing it to you, and as you can see, it took me 1.5 years to even show you what I look like. I truly want to voice all my videos myself, but I have certain fears. Many of you are already used to the voice I currently use on the channel, and I wouldn't want to lose that part of the audience because each of you is so important to me. But I promise that soon you'll hear my real voice. I'd also love to hear from you. Should I even try, or are you happy with the way things are? Another thing that many of you have been dissatisfied with, and I completely understand you, is the repetitive nature of some of my recent videos. Judging by your comments, it's been harmful to the channel. I completely agree that this is the wrong way to run the channel, but please give me a minute or a couple of minutes to explain everything. First of all, I want to apologize to each and every one of you for this, and I hope you'll understand me. I also want to assure you that this will never happen again. I'd rather not upload anything at all than continue down that path. This will be a very personal monologue, so I won't mention certain details. Over the past year, I've been dealing with serious family issues, and it's taken a toll not only on my mental health but also on my physical well-being. Recently, I just couldn't push myself to create something new, if before I tried my best to ignore these issues and brush them off. Starting in December, the situation only got worse. It felt like, at the most critical moment when I needed to be as active and positive as possible, I'm talking about mid-December, I was completely drained. To make matters worse, every single idea I had for a video was failing, and it made me feel like I couldn't come up with or create anything truly worthwhile anymore. Day after day, this continued, and at some point, I just burned out. I forced myself to make a few videos, but they all ended up feeling like copies of previous ones. Then, I completely disappeared for a week. I was just lying around doing absolutely nothing, staring at the ceiling. But I've always tried to stay positive, and at one point, I realized that if I let this go on, I'd turn into a shadow of my former self. Meanwhile, the family situation kept getting worse and worse. One day I decided to leave it all behind. I took all the savings I'd managed to earn and set aside. I want to say a huge thank you, not only to you, but also to myself. All those wonderful moments we've shared on this channel. And to be honest, the money I was able to earn and save gave me the courage to take a big step. I packed up all my things and moved into a rental apartment. It's been a few days since then, and I'm starting to feel happy again. I'm excited to sit down, brainstorm, and create something new to bring joy to both you and myself. I feel like I've started living again. As I've mentioned, this matter is far too personal to go into details, but if you're genuinely interested, I promise to share everything once I've fully moved past it. Now, the final part of my speech is about the future of the Amadici channel. As you've noticed, no theory about the Amazing Digital Circus is getting the same traction it did even a couple of weeks ago. Many people have simply lost interest, and to be honest, I'm feeling a little burnt out on TADC myself. This doesn't mean that TADC will disappear from the channel forever. As soon as truly exciting information emerges, I'll be the first to update you. But for now, we all need a little break from ADC. As sad as it is to admit, it's time to take a new step, one that could make this channel even bigger, higher quality, more interesting, and versatile. And if I start filming myself and using my real voice instead of AI-generated audio, I can't even imagine the heights we could reach together. Many of you know that Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 is coming soon. Unfortunately, I missed the releases of the first 2 chapters at the time, but Chapter 3 really hooked me. I couldn't stop watching different theories about it. To be honest, I thought about making theories not just about ADC, but also about Poppy Playtime a year ago. Back then, fear held me back, and I decided not to pursue it. But now, we'll take that leap and aim even higher. What do you think? Does this sound like a good idea? As I promised, here are a few of my favorite theories from Amadici. I promise this won't take much of your time, but if you watch them, it would mean the world to me. We've all had a good laugh at Kinger's weird behavior, but not many people realize that he wasn't always like this. Long before the pilot episode, he was a pretty chill guy who went through something terrifying. But we'll get to that later. When the trio set out to find Kaufmo, most of them noticed a room that had a really strange character who looked a lot like Kinger. Almost a year ago, theories started popping up that it could be his wife, Queenie. But since her portrait on the door was crossed out, it became pretty clear that she shared Kaufmo's fate. Looking at everything Kinger did up until one of the last scenes of the 3rd episode, it was hard to believe he'd ever snap out of it. But in a conversation with Pomni, we finally figured out what pushed him over the edge into total madness. And trust me, that's just the tip of the iceberg of what we learned about Kinger in episode 3. That's how we officially found out that Kinger really did have a wife, and he genuinely loved and respected her. We also got to hear some wise words from the now older Kinger, which will probably stick with Pomni. It also became clear why he's always building those strange pillow forts. It's a habit he developed after his wife's death, and only inside them does he feel safe. I couldn't help but think that Kinger doesn't really want things to change anymore. He probably prefers staying in the digital circus, where everything is familiar and makes sense to him. Returning to the real world in his current state would be a huge mistake, but did Kinger become this way only after Queenie's death? Or were there already signs of his madness before that tragic moment? Gooseworx officially told us that the 3rd episode is focused on 2 characters, Zubul and Kinger, and it would be strange to sum up Kinger's story in a 2-minute conversation. In reality, Goose hit a huge clue for us that directly ties into Kinger, those tapes from Baron Mildenhall that Kinger kept playing and listening to very closely.
Tuesday, December 4th. Although I had shot the creature multiple times in its vitals and severed its head to keep as a prize on my wall, my troubles were just beginning. I took my eyes off the body for what felt like only a minute. When I looked back, the body was gone. The creature was not dead, and it would be back to reclaim what I'd taken from it. If anyone is listening to this, all I ask of you is one thing. Do not let the head out of your sight. You have been warned.
Wow. Isn't it strange that Kinger was the one listening to those tapes, and in the end, we were shown Queenie as an abstracted monster? What if the story of the Baron is actually a reflection of Kinger's life in the digital circus long before the pilot episode, particularly his relationship with his wife? In the Baron's story, he talks about an angel, but in the digital circus that couldn't exist. So it's likely that the creature is a stand-in for the monster everyone turns into when they lose their mind. This is also confirmed by the fact that when Kinger encountered the angel, he froze and said those words.
You look beautiful, honey.
Most likely in the angel's mouth, he saw his wife, which further convinces us that the theory of the abstracted monster being a reference to the angel is absolutely true. Going back to the flashback scene, we see even more proof of my theory being right. Each character always sees the abstracted monster for the first time, and Kinger was no exception. He probably thought the digital circus was a happy place at first, until that initial encounter with the monster, which started all his problems. In his tale, the Baron mentions taking the head of the angel, and that was the source of his troubles. As we remember from the pilot episode, the abstracted monsters are extremely aggressive, and their main goal is to destroy the other residents. What if Kinger saved his wife by pulling her from the monster's grasp, but in doing so, became its victim instead? Now we know that Kane managed to save him, but Kinger's entire world started crumbling right before his eyes. While Ragatha is always friendly and upbeat, and could easily handle her encounter with Kaufmo, Kinger might have started losing his mind after a similar experience, and that was the beginning of his downfall. Something the Baron of that dreadful manor will reveal to us as well. We've all seen how well Kinger can shoot. I think such a high skill level doesn't just happen overnight, so he must have known how to do this long before. In his story, the Baron mentions that he went so crazy that he started fearing every little sound and noise. Doesn't that remind you of someone? This fear eventually took over his mind and control to the point where he couldn't handle his emotions and confused his wife with the angel. It's also likely that, long before the pilot episode, using weapons was allowed in the digital circus since we saw them in both the 2nd and 3rd episodes. But after Kinger misused a weapon, Kane permanently removed it from the digital circus tent. Also, notice how carefully Kinger handled the shotgun when something terrible possessed Pomni. Instead of shooting, he started hitting the creature. This suggests that Kinger subconsciously remembers that moment with his wife, making him more cautious with the weapon. But you might say, in the digital circus, you can't die. And I agree with you. But imagine if your husband or wife were shooting at you, accompanied by intense paranoia. After going through that, Queenie couldn't keep her sanity and slowly started distancing herself from everyone, especially Kinger. Eventually, this led to her becoming that very abstracted monster. And now we understand why Kinger behaves so strangely 90% of the time. He just hasn't been able to cope with the trauma he caused himself and his loved one,